Welcome, Internet! Are you ready to get cool and stop being such a nerd? Yeah, you are, because today Loaf and I are taking the ambulance out on some sweet jumps, and he's driving. Buckle in, because today we're making your car cool for once. Today on Bread to Loaf, we are working inside the 78 G30 ambulance, otherwise known as the Lance. Today we're doing engine cooling, and specifically we're going to install an actual brass switch to control the fans turning on and off. This is the upper radiator outlet coming off the engine block, and we're going to replace that old crusty corroded one with a new one, as well as new gaskets. So if we look at the current setup we have in the ambulance right here, this is the upper radiator hose, and we have our temperature sensor for inside the dash, kind of just taped, wrapped around the hose, and then we have another cooling fan switch taped up to the hose right here. And I mean, if you own a Jeep, this might be good enough for you, but we're working on the ambulance, so we're gonna go pro. So, current setup, kinda jank. We're gonna be replacing it with this new system where we can swap in and out temperature switches for the cooling fans to moderate the temperature to whatever season it is. As you can see, this coolant outlet has a threaded 1/2-inch MPT hole, which is plugged by a 1/2-inch brass plug. And here's the sort of setup down here, kind of exploded. These small sensors up on top that thread into this brass plug can be swapped out on the fly, and you don't have to unthread this entire plug, as you can see right there. So you just pop off these two spade connectors, swap in a new switch, and you have different temps. Before we get into it, let's talk a little bit about how a typical cooling system works on a standard vehicle. Now, you have your engine block, which power produced through the combustion process, and that needs to be cooled down generally with liquid. So you have coolant flowing through the engine block through all the passageways, and then as it gets hot enough, it flows up past your thermostat, out through this outlet right here, up through your upper radiator hose, and into your radiator. From there, it will be cooled by air passing through the fins as your vehicle moves forward, and then typically that coolant will flow up into the water pump, and it will be cycled back through the engine. Now, a lot of cars do have a coolant bypass hose that goes up into your dash, and it runs through your heater core, which provides heat to the inside cabin, and that generally comes off of the upper radiator outlet housing and will generally either flow into the radiator or maybe back into the block. Now, the reason we're doing a temperature switch right here at the outlet on the top of the engine block is because generally the temperatures are going to be around the hottest when they're exiting through here. Now, of course, you can have temperature switches on the upper radiator hose or in your radiator, but generally you have to raise the temperature of those switches where they activate to compensate for the heat losses as they flow down. But we're going to do right here because this is a good spot. So, to get to the ambulance engine, we have to actually remove this cover right here. Okay, so engine exposed, and now we have to pop off the air cleaner and the spacer so we can get better access over to the upper radiator hose, which is buried right underneath the dash. Thanks, GM. Okay, with all of that removed, now we have much better access to get to the radiator hose. Okay, hose is off, and guess what? She's full of fluid, so I'm gonna soak that up and I'll bring you right back. Okay, I'm back again. I just had to use a trusty little pump to suck out some of the fluid that was still in there, so now we're gonna go and try to get the bolts off. Okay, turns out there's a few more things to get out of the way. There is a mounting plate for this AC compressor, so got that off. And guess what? We have a snap washer as well, so we'll have to replace that. Okay, old one is finally off. As you can see, it's pretty crusty, and we got this old crumbling gasket here. So we're going to go ahead and clean up that mating surface where the gas is going to go, and then we'll get to installing. The bolts that we removed were 7/16 head, and we're going to go clean them up on the wire wheel, because why not? Bolts have been shined up, so now we're ready for gasket and new housing. Okay, bolts are in. So now we're going to torque it down. The torque spec for the thermostat housing is 20 to 30 foot-pounds. So I've set my wrench to 26 foot-pounds, and we're going to tighten it down. Okay, well, she is now installed with the hose on. So now we get to go do the electrical connectors. So back over in the engine bay, we have these two wires here, which were on this upper radiator hose, kind of just wrapped around it with the switch. So we are going to connect these two wires to the two spade terminals on our new switch on the thermostat housing. The wires are a bit short, so we will have to extend them, and then we'll put the spade terminals on the other end. Okay, as you can see, we got both wires stripped, and we have the ends on them. So now we just have to solder them into these wires right here. The wires have been soldered and heat shrinked, so now we have to snake them up into the radiator hose. So we have the wires snaking into the engine bay area and then down to the coolant switch. So now it's just a matter of tightening everything up with zip ties. Okay, and there we go. Wires run and routed and zip tied. Now, of course, the last thing you would do would be to run the engine, get it up to operating temperature, and then see if the switches kick on at your desired temperature. And if they do, great. If not, well, tear it back apart. Make sure you check for those leaks. Well, this has been a Bread to Loaf production. Hope you enjoyed it. We're going to be tearing into this engine even more, probably redoing the carburetor, putting on an EFI system, so stay tuned for that. Bread to Loaf, signing off.